my students just tell me to slow down. I'm not offended by it. So if I'm talking too quickly, please just let me know. So I am going to present on the Congressional Policy Practice Project, which I'm doing with two colleagues, except I'm implementing it slightly different than they have. My one colleague is Dr. Angelique Day from University of Washington in Seattle, and the other is Dr. Mary Hilton, who is in Salisbury University in Maryland. They decided to implement this project as part of their policy classes, and I decided to do it as a standalone internship opportunity for students. So as we know about policy practice in the field of education, it can be defined as the efforts to change policies in legislative, agency, or community settings by establishing new policies, improving existing ones, or defeating the policy initiatives of other people. Of course, Bruce Jansen said that. As it relates to policy practice specific field placements, this is field-based activities are really influenced by the development, implementation, and or evaluation of programs or policies with the intent of promoting social justice, equity, and well-being. And this can be accomplished through advocacy agencies, community groups and coalitions, commissions, human service administration agencies, elected officials, consulting firms, lobbying firms, and even civic engagement groups like in the US League of Women Voters, among others. Just a brief overview of some of the literature on policy practice in the field, which there is not a lot on. So as it relates to efficacy, students really do lack a sense of efficacy in policy practice. And in something I published that didn't have a large N, but I thought it was really important, I was happy to get it published, is I surveyed students in my doctoral program who were entering a master's program during the very first semester, at the beginning of the semester, to really try to understand, are students coming in socialized to really believe in the mission and the vision and the direction of social work and its mandate around political engagement? Or was this something that was being really developed when they were in their social work programs? And this also could have happened when they were in their undergrad programs, because this is a master's level program. And what we found were that, students who came in with a real macro focus really had a significantly greater engagement and belief in policy and politics than those that were micro-oriented. So that gave us a hint that students already have this pre-formation, pre-socialization that they're bringing into social work programs at the graduate level. And so we really, if we want to really understand why that is, we really have to focus some research on that. But also, if you look at Miller's model, not a lot of research has been done in what happens to social workers after they leave formal socialization, which is social work education. How do they take that knowledge and they further develop it? We know that engagement, students who are in direct field placements believe that they will never engage in policy practice. It's a slightly older study, but anecdotally from my work, I find the same thing to be true. And in a more recent article by Suzanne and Shannon, they only found 8 to 16% of social work student placements in a policy or political social work focus. So a very small percentage of those that are actually being offered or participating in policy or political placements in schools of social work. Also, a much older one, Volk et al., as well as Shannon's, found very similar findings, which in itself is disappointing, but they found that field faculty do not believe political practica meet accreditation standards in the United States. The MS Foundation students, are now called the generalist year students, are less likely to be exposed to policy or political social work placements. And field directors express concern about the readiness of students for policy and political work, which are some significant hurdles. There are others, such as in both studies, they found that there wasn't professional social workers to provide the necessary supervision. The I call them field folks, field staff, didn't know how to develop policy practice placements. they just didn't feel comfortable with it. They didn't know what that meant or how it looked. There was some perceived risk associated with students engaging in political activities, not really understanding that you can engage in political activities and not often is heard is this piece around wanting to take not wanting to take the client's um, self-interest or decision-making authority away from them. However, it's hard to help students understand that part of our job as social workers is to educate. And so that is a part of our mandate among other pieces. There is a lack of student interest in such placements. Distance to state capitals was mentioned in Dickinson, and students believe they need clinical experience in order to find employment. And I think for all of these barriers, the model I'm going to propose actually potentially can overcome some of them. Of course, we're going to evaluate it and see what happens as it relates to the competencies. So what is CPPP? So it's really, in essence, um, three stages. One is having these prior relationships with federal congressional offices, with their staff or the member themselves, and to develop and further expand these relationships so students can work in support with their staff of pieces of legislation. So actually work hands-on, do the research, do the writing, helping to understand who is going to support a bill through a congressional matrix, doing red line copies, which is, crossing out language within a bill and replacing it. What my colleague and I are finding is that I'm doing group supervision with them, which is a blessing and a curse. It really takes a lot of time, but I enjoy it. Right now I have 6 interns, and they're doing a variety of hours between 14 and 21 hours a week. But what we're finding is there also needs to be a lot of supplemental training. So understanding how to do a policy brief, understanding what a congressional matrix is, understanding how to really do proper interviews with stakeholders and people who are impacted by the law. Lots and lots of supplemental training. And then the outcome is, and we're already seeing this, that these students become issue experts. And so all of the policies that we're handling are around child welfare. And so these students are going to be leaving with this vast amount of knowledge and experience that I would argue no one else in the country outside of my 2 colleagues is giving anybody. So broadly, the CPP project brings together students from 3 universities, University of Washington, as well as Salisbury University, around specific initiatives with members of Congress. The students are provided the opportunity to engage in project management and policy practice at the federal level. Interns are provided the opportunity to become familiar with congressional policymaking process, how the bills become law, conference committees, the committee structure itself, develop professional relationships with congressional staffers who, as somebody who worked in a member of Congress's office, are really the heart and soul of all this work. And work with students and researchers from social work education programs across the country, which our students do. They attend trainings with the University of Washington students as well as Salisbury University students. My interns will actually be working with those 2 universities to help finish the bills that they have started working on. So this is a list of, and I don't necessarily hope that I have to read them, but this is a list of items that we actually tell our students that they will get the opportunity to do if they intern in my placement. And to this point, they've done all of these. And really, some of these were actually initiated by my students who, for example, really wanted to have a logo, which is forthcoming, really wanted to have a Facebook page, really wanted to have a website where they could talk about what they're doing so everybody could understand, but also they wanted to share their personal experiences through both mediums around what this experience has been like as students. And I have students that are both undergraduate and graduate students. And it's been amazing to watch them grow and really, as everybody has talked about, to watch their agency or their self-efficacy as well as their political efficacy expand and grow in this process, just anecdotally without actually giving a tool, has been amazing. It's it's been so reaffirming of this process. And also understand for my specific group, not all of my students are macro focused. Half are going to be in clinical setting, the other half are going to be in some form of community or macro work. And we purposely did that because we really believe that this policy experience doesn't necessarily have to result in a policy job. It could if they want that, but that policy is so important to social work practitioners broadly, that they need these skills. And hopefully by having these skills, they will engage even though they may be seeing clients Monday through Friday. So the implementation thus far, I'm currently working with 2 congressional offices. I'm working with Congresswoman Karen Bass's office of California, who's been talked about being appointed to the US Senate, as well as the short list for vice president. And I'm also working with Congresswoman Judy Chu's office. Both of them represent Los Angeles in some capacity. The child welfare bills that we're working on right now are codifying Flores into law, and that's American vernacular. So in 1997, the United States was sued because of the way they were treating children who are separated at the border. And so Flores is a consent decree around the minimum standard that these kids had to be, how the minimum standard for how these kids had to be dealt with. The problem is the current administration has sued and pushed back and not met the requirements of the consent decree. So working with Karen Bass's office, our goal is to codify that into federal law, but also include very specific measures around how these families should be treated, the type of services they should receive, the type of care that they should receive. It's going to be a massive bill. As of right now, it's 50 pages and it's still growing. Another bill that we're dealing with is strengthening the special immigrant juvenile status law. So in the United States, if an immigrant child comes to the United States and they don't have a parent, or their parent has abandoned them, or they don't have a guardian, the states in our country are where the child protective services kick in, or county. They can go to a judge, ask for parental rights to be removed, and then working with immigration can ask for these kids who are have to be under the age of 21, but are far younger generally, to get a special visa that will give them lawful permanent residency in our country because they've been abandoned. But there are lots of holes in it. It's not used widely. We don't think there's enough training, and it's a very cumbersome process. So my students have proposed I'd say it's a great to see what they propose, but they've offered very progressive solutions to how do we streamline this process and how do we make it better for the kids that are experiencing this. As we know from the child welfare literature, the most harm is done when a child is moved from home to home to home, and it disrupts their growth. And so we want to make this program as streamlined as possible so a child can go right into a new home setting without having to get bounced between congregate care and a placement in a foster family. And also, starting this spring, my 2 other colleagues are working on several other bills, but one is repeal and place the Multi-Ethnic Placement Act, which is around, you must put, in essence, a child into a placement that is similar, the same to their ethnic identity, which seems like a good thing, but it's been used and abused. It's not been used towards a betterment of the child. And so it's working with the congressional offices, it's repealing that and replacing it with something better. And also we have a very big problem in our child welfare system in the United States, where the vast majority of child welfare workers are white. Unfortunately, the vast majority of children in the system are of color, Black, Latino, Asian, Native American. And so we want to find a way to diversify the system and to entice social workers to go into it who are of color. So there's better representation. We have 2 congressional offices that have reached out to us wanting us to, quote, pitch child welfare bills to them. They're on the Powerful Ways and Means Committee, where Congresswoman Judy Chu sits. And so we will be, I'm sorry, that's my daughter if you can hear her. We will be coming up with pitches this coming spring to find out if any of our bills that we are interested in, they would like to take up, and we would work with them. Right now we have students taking 2 seminar classes, which is a little weird. We do that because we're finding that the content that students need for our field setting is so specialized that we want them to have the additional training and the support they need, but also they get that through my supervision. And I don't want them to have all of their time and placement being gobbled up by these trainings and seminars, because I really do want them to do the work, which they're doing. So my colleague Kate Kelly and I are looking at a new model to try to implement, which is having these students be in a seminar class just with each other, and provide seminar and supervision at a prolonged period of time so that we can train for one part of the meeting and do supervision at the other part. And the other good or bad side is I've dedicated a lot of my time to this project, but it could be a detriment for other people depending on what their teaching load is, requirements are at their schools. I am able to do this because this is the work that I do, but for some other people it may be too much. But again, I think the model that we've created overcomes almost all, I'm just going to go back to overcome all the barriers that were listed in the literature. There is professional supervision. I provide it. Our field department works very close to me. We have a new field director who is even more supportive of doing this type of work in social work education. And she is very much interested in what I do, but also helping her find other policy placements. So I think we overcome that. I think we've overcome the risk with my students and my field department of the engaging in policy practice activities. There still is a lack of student interest, but not by my students. They really have connected why this work is so very important for the field they're going in. So all the students that are clinical by nature in my internship are wanting to go into child welfare in some form. So they're getting a real deep dive in that exposure. So they see very much connect to what they want to do. By making this remote, by using technology, Zoom and conference calls, we've eliminated distance as a barrier. We meet live with all of our stakeholders. We meet live with our partners on the Hill. Distance is not an issue right now. And I think COVID has made that particularly clear, that technology really can overcome those by just thinking a little differently about field. And yes, the vast majority of my students in my university still think they need a clinical experience in order to find employment, but we have an integrated practice model in at my university. So they get built-in community and policy required content, regardless of whether they are going to be a clinical focus or community focus. So I think for us, we've overcome most of the barriers as we do our survey as we move forward, and implement this more times. We're hoping to find out where are some of our weaknesses and where we could do better. And that's me.